All right, let's get started. So this first lecture about early China is gonna be about some general background knowledge about what we call early China. First, the question is, where are Chinese from? Where are Chinese from? There are two theories. One theory is that Chinese came from China. No, this is not a joke. This opinion has been held by a lot of native Chinese scholars. They believe that Homo sapiens have been developed in China indigenously, independently. But this theory has been widely discredited. Okay. Over the past 20, 30 years, more anthropological studies have shown that all humans came from Africa. Okay, we are Homo sapiens. I mean, as a species, right? As a species. I mean, starting from like millions of years ago, there have been archaic humans called hominins that are widely seen everywhere in a lot of places in the world, right? Hominins are early human-like species, but more than 1 million years ago, the early hominins, they got out of Africa, okay? Some of them migrated to Middle East, Europe, West Asia, and some of them migrated to China, some of them even migrated to Indonesia, right? These early humans are called hominins. There are a variety of them, right? Those hominins in Middle East and Europe are called Neanderthals. I mean, we know that Neanderthals are like cousins to Homo sapiens. And then in West Asia and Russia, in this area, we have hominins called Denisovans, right? And in East Asia, we have a kind of a hominins called Homo erectus. They're sort of like us. They have a higher, the Homo erectus in China, they're sort of like a Neanderthals. They probably can talk a little bit, but not as sophisticated as us in terms of language skills or social cooperative skills. The Homo erectus, whose remains were discovered in East Asia, shows that they have they don't have a chin like us because they don't need to talk that much like Homo sapiens do. And they have, higher eyebrow ridges, right? They are more muscular, have more muscles, right? Just like Neanderthals. Yeah, those are the Homo erectus we discovered in East Asia. And everywhere in China, we discovered a lot of remains of Homo erectus. All these Homo erectus migrated to China from Africa more than 1 million years ago. But they are not Homo sapiens. They're not modern humans. Modern humans as a species probably came into being in East Africa around 200,000 years ago. And then around 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens left Africa. Okay, they left Africa through today's Egypt. Okay, and then, I mean, the migration of Homo sapiens to populate the planet takes a long time. It's a very, very long process. Yeah, averagely one generation moves only, I don't know, 5 miles, 10 miles. It's just that slow. Okay, so it takes like more than 100,000 years for humans to populate the entire planet. When Homo sapiens arrived Middle East, they encountered Neanderthals, the hominins, other hominins, similar to us, but not the same. Well, modern genetic studies have shown that modern humans, especially those, we're talking about Europeans and Asians, they all have like 3 to 5% of Neanderthals gene, which suggests that on the way of the Homo sapiens migration to the whole world, they probably made it with other hominins they encountered, including Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus. Yeah, so this is why all these Homo sapiens outside of Africa all share 3 to 5% of Neanderthals gene, but people in Africa, they don't have that gene. So this shows something happened on the way when the Homo sapiens migrated to other places. Okay, so the Homo sapiens migration to the whole world is a very long process, as we said. The earliest remains we found in East Asia of Homo sapiens dated to about 40 to 60,000 years ago, very late in history. Before that, we don't have solid evidence to show Homo sapiens are already there. Okay, so yeah, let's say 65,000 years ago, no later than 65,000 years ago, Homo sapiens arrived in East Asia. But when they arrived in East Asia, they probably have already picked up, a lot of technologies like how to make clothes, how to use bow and arrows. I mean, all these technologies are certainly already picked up by Homo sapiens. So when they arrived in East Asia, they're really good hunters already. Okay, and then once Homo sapiens arrived in East Asia, very quickly the Homo erectus went into extinction, together with many other large animals in East Asia. Yeah, this is common for many continents that are populated by Homo sapiens. Once Homo sapiens came, the local large animals went into extinction because our ancestors were just way too good hunters. So yeah, Homo erectus totally disappeared. Disappeared starting from 60,000 years ago in East Asia. But today, some Chinese scholars, they still believe that today's Chinese are direct descendants of Homo erectus that are discovered in China. Let me show you one. One statue. This is how Homo erectus looked. They looked very similar to Neanderthals. Yeah. This is a Peking man. Actually, she's a woman. Well, who is she? In the 1920s, a skull of Homo erectus was discovered in a place called Zhou near to this Beijing. This is an archaeological discovery from the 1920s. And then archaeologists and scientists that believe that they're probably related to modern Chinese. So if you grew up in China, and if you study the Chinese history in China, the first page of your high school textbook in China, I mean, I studied it. I mean, I went to high school in China, so I know this. The first page of a textbook in China would show this image. And the textbook will tell you that today's Chinese are direct descendants of the Peking man, which is a Homo erectus. But over the past 20, 30 years, more anthropological studies have shown that Homo sapiens actually migrated from Africa. But when they arrived in East Asia, they may have mated with the Homo erectus there, but they're still Homo sapiens. So in other words, modern Chinese probably have a certain percentage of gene from Homo erectus, but more than 90% of modern Chinese and Japanese and Koreans as well are Homo sapiens. So this whole process is very complicated. There's still so much we don't know about the process of migration of Homo sapiens to East Asia. Okay. But what I can tell you is that most biological anthropologists, especially if they're trained in the West, they believe that Homo sapiens all migrated to East Asia from Africa. But those Chinese scholars who maintain that the Chinese are direct descendants of Homo erectus, in my opinion, a lot of them make this argument based on some sentiment of nationalism. You see what I'm talking about, right? Because a lot of times when you want to emphasize your national pride, you want to push back your history to as early as possible, and you want to emphasize the fact that everything is invented, developed in China. So you want to highlight this indigenous culture, but a lot of times there isn't enough evidence to support that. Yeah. So yeah, in my opinion, where Chinese are from, this is not just a scientific question. A lot of times, this is also a political question. So how you answer that question depends on your political stance. This is just one example. In the discussion of the Chinese history over the semester, we will see many other examples like this. A lot of times, history is highly politicized. So that means all kinds of political forces are trying to use history support their argument and their political attitude and stance. Yeah, so where Chinese are from is not a simple question. There has been this, so by and large, there are two theories about that we just talked about. One theory is that Chinese are natively developed. The other theory is that all Homo sapiens migrated to their current region from Africa. I personally agree with the second opinion more, because I think genetic studies certainly provides more evidence to show that Chinese are from Africa, just like everybody else. Okay, Chinese are not that unique in this sense. Chinese are still Homo sapiens, just like Japanese, Koreans, or Native Americans. Actually, Native Americans, we have a lot of solid evidence to show that they migrated to Americas no later than 14 to 13,000 years ago from Asia. Yeah. So you may even argue that Native Americans are overseas Chinese. No, that's a joke. Okay, they're not overseas Chinese, but they're from China. Their ancestors migrated to North America, Alaska from the place we know today as China, through Siberia. I mean, this is outside of this map, but you can imagine the route of migration, right? From Africa, right? There are multiple routes of Homo sapiens finally arrived in China, and some of them arrived at Taiwan, which is this island on southeast China. Polynesians. We know the Polynesians, including Australian Aboriginals, their ancestors are all from Taiwan, part of China. I mean, culturally, it's part of China. Okay, we don't want to get into the political disputes about whether Taiwan is part of China or not. So in this case, we just mentioned Taiwan as just part of cultural China. Yeah, but some Homo sapiens continue to go north, and then they go to today's Siberia and Inner Asia, and then through Bering Strait. Well, more than 1,000 years ago, during the last ice age, the sea level was lower. So today's Bering Strait was actually a land bridge. So this allowed the Homo sapiens to walk to North America, to Alaska. So Native Americans actually arrived America quite late in history. And then using thousands of years, Homo sapiens gradually populated the entire Americas all the way to Amazon, right? So yeah, so in that sense, China is just one of the places that Homo sapiens settled, okay? But how did a civilization emerged into its current place? Well, if we look at this map, it shows the four ancient civilizations: Egyptian civilization, Mesopotamian, ancient Indian civilization, and ancient Chinese civilization. Well, one thing in common is that they all have to be near a great river valley. Well, the reason is simple, because for civilization to develop, you need water. You need a big river so that you could have agriculture. Agriculture depends heavily on irrigation system. And so you need a lot of water and the river. So it's not a coincidence that all these ancient civilizations all are near a great rivers, right? The Nile River, right, is a mother of Egyptian civilization. The river of Tigris and Euphrates, these are the cradles of the Mesopotamian civilization. And the Indus River certainly breeds the Indian civilization. And in China, we have two big rivers. In the north, we have the Yellow River. In the south, we have the Yangtze River. Both rivers originated in the place we call Tibet, okay, near in this area between China and India. Tibet is the highest plateau or highland in the world. The average altitude of Tibet is 3 times higher than Colorado Springs, right? Here, the average altitude of Colorado Springs is what, 6,000 feet above the sea, right? But in Tibet is 18,000 feet above the sea. So you will have a lot more oxygen problem there than in Colorado. Anyway, so both rivers originated from Tibet and they flow to the Pacific Ocean. Okay, and these two rivers really breed what's known as Chinese civilization, okay? Especially Yellow River. Around 1,000 years ago, between 1,000 years and 6,000 years ago, agriculture developed independently in East Asia. We know that agriculture first emerged in West Asia. You know, people in West Asia, somehow they domesticated the wheat, barley, all these major crops. And then through the trade routes around the Mediterranean Sea, agriculture as a technology was transmitted to Europe, to Egypt, to Arabia, right, to Iran, all these neighboring areas, right? We're talking about this area. Yeah, from this place is called Minor Asia in today's Turkey. In southern Minor Asia, through Middle East, all the way down to Egypt, we have a lot of a fertile soil. So historians call this area the Fertile Crescent. This is where agriculture was invented around 10,000 years ago. At the same time, agriculture was also developing in East Asia. In the north, people domesticated crops, native crops like soya, millet, sorghum, right? These are typical East Asian crops. In the south, people, Homo sapiens domesticated rice. Yeah, but until quite recent, rice was rarely planted in northern China along the Yellow River area. For example, Confucius probably never ate any rice. Yeah, because in the Analects, we don't see any mention of rice. So his major food is soybeans, millet, and sorghum, right? And soybeans has been the major food for all East Asian people. I'm sure you must have been to any sushi place, right? When you go to a sushi place, every table would have a soy sauce bottle there, right? Did you notice that? This allows you to serve yourself a little soy sauce when you eat a sushi. Soy sauce is made from fermented soy. So soy is very, very important for the diets of all East Asian people, right? Tofu, again. Anyone love tofu? I'm sure you love tofu, right? Tofu is made from soy, right? Yeah, which can be dated back to more than 1,000 years ago. And this is soy-based food is very common for all East Asian societies, China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, right? So that's the kind of this all has to do with the unique experience of agriculture, invention of agriculture in East Asia. Okay, so civilization is based on agriculture, because only when humans have agriculture, then you have a lot of surplus of food, right? This is super important. Before the invention of agriculture, when you're hunter-gatherers, you're gonna spend hours most of the day hunting, foraging, gathering, right? You won't have time to do anything else. That's the problem. But only when you have agriculture, you're gonna have villages, right? Because you have to be sedentary. You have to settle down in order to take care of your land. And then when agriculture provides so much food, that means you will have a lot of surplus of resources of food. This will allow some people in the society to specialize in something else. For example, writing, craftsmanship, right? Technology, all these things that are different from agriculture and hunting gathering. So that's how civilization came into being. Okay, so for all these ancient civilizations to develop, you need several conditions, right? You need agriculture, you need a natural environment really good for agriculture, right? For example, in the Yangtze River, in the Yellow River plain, this is, Chinese call this area Central Plain in northern China, Central Plain, Zhongyuan, okay? In the Central Plain, where the Yellow River flows through, you have, thousands of years ago, you have very fertile soil called a low S. Low S basically is a dust, a very fine, thin, fine parcel of soil. And that kind of soil is very good for agriculture. Just like the Nile River Valley in Egypt, it doesn't require a lot of labor for you to have a harvest. So that's a good thing. It's a blessing for Chinese. So thousands of years ago, civilization first came into being along the Yellow River area in northern China. Yeah, but civilization was also developing independently in other areas in China, like in Sichuan, because we have a Sanxingdui culture settlements to show that civilizations are actually developing in many areas in China, not just in Central Plain, not just in Central Plain. The Confucian scholars in the spring and autumn period, around like 600 to 400 BCE. BCE means before Common Era. That's about 2,500 years ago. Confucian scholars during that time, when they look at Chinese history, they highlighted the role played by a range of so-called cultural heroes. Okay, this is something interesting about the early Chinese civilization. Because if you compare early Chinese civilization to many other civilizations like Japanese or Mayan or European civilizations, in all other civilizations, you always see some kind of a legend or myth about gods or deities and how they created the world, right? You always see that. I mean, think about the Holy Bible, right? It's all about how God creating the world. But Chinese are different. 2,500 years ago, Confucian scholars, when they talk about the origin of Chinese civilization, they at first, they never mentioned any deities or gods. Instead, they talk about cultural heroes. For example, they say, it is cultural heroes that invented clothing, invented housing, invented hunting, invented writing. So all these cultural achievements are invented by humans just like us, but they're smarter. So there is no supernatural power, no magical power involved in creation of the world. Okay, so it's a very sort of a commonsensical and a more secular narration of how civilization began, and you only see that in China. Yeah. All right. So according to the Confucian tradition, there are several so-called sage kings that came into being when civilization began. I mean, you don't have to remember their names. I'm just mentioning their names. The Yao, Shun, and the Yu, these are the three sage kings that sort of created a government, created a calendar, created agriculture, invented wine, invented all these technologies that are crucial to modern civilization. And that's how civilization came into being, okay, according to Confucian legends. And when Yao, Shun, and Yu, these sage kings were ruling, there was no dynasty. There was no kings. I mean, they are called sage kings, but they don't pass on their power to their own offspring. Okay, for example, when Yao is dying, the legend has it that Yao ruled for like 60 or 80 years. And when he is dying, he had this meeting with his followers saying, hey, let's have an election. And you can recommend, everybody can recommend the next king. And somebody recommended, say, Yao's own son. But Yao says, no, my son is not good. He's quarrelsome and stupid. So somebody recommended another person called Shun. And according to the Confucian story, Shun was recommended because he's a virtuous man. He's morally virtuous. He's a good man. He was able to harmonize his family. Okay, although he had a really stupid father and a wicked stepmother who tries to kill him. According to the Confucian text, Shun's stepmother failed at killing Shun for a couple of times, but Shun still is able to harmonize this terrible family. So this shows his virtue as a family man. And Yao buys all these stories, and that's why Yao picked Shun as the next king. So this story is not just an interesting story from history. It shows ideas. In my opinion, this story shows that meritocracy is a fundamental value that ancient Confucian scholars cherish. Okay. What's interesting in this story is that Shun did not follow primogeniture. That means pass on power to your own sons to be the next king, right? I mean, although this is a common practice for many other regions in the world, and also this is a common practice for imperial China, but in the spring and autumn period, we're talking about 2,500 years ago, at least the Confucian scholars, they don't think that's the most ideal situation. They don't think that's the most ideal political system. Instead, the Confucian scholars think meritocracy is the way to go. You're supposed to choose the most morally virtuous person to be the political leader. So in other words, political power should go to a good family man. In this case, it's Shun, right? So family value coincides with the political value here, okay? So this is a story about Yao and Shun. And then when Shun is dying, he followed the same tradition. He did not give the power or the throne to his own son. Instead, he hired people to manage the affairs in his kingdom. His kingdom, if really existed, probably existed in northern China along the near the Central Plain. So when Shun was there, okay, there was a big flood. I don't know why, all these ancient civilizations all have a legend about the flood. So maybe this memory of big flood has to do with the fading away of the last ice age, when a lot of ice is melting. So you have a lot of floods everywhere in the world, in Middle East, in China, right? So anyway, so the Chinese did have their memory of floods, okay? So when Shun was there, there's a huge flood, but different from Noah, who built a big boat, the Ark of Noah, right? This is the story from the Bible. The Chinese, when they faced with the floods, what they did is that they relied on human labor and power to solve the problem. They did not refer to some supernatural power or godly interference. Instead, Shun first hired someone to try to solve the flood problem. The first person he hired is trying to block all the floods, but he failed because floods are too great. But then Yu came, this person, okay, Yu used a different methodology, okay? Yu channeled the rivers and the big river and lakes, and then he guided the excessive water, the floods, into the ocean. And he worked really hard for 10 years, finally solved that problem, okay? So he showed his merit, and for that reason, Shun appointed Yu as the next king. So you really have to show your merit in order to have political power, okay? So that's the story of Yu that solved the flooding problem, okay? So Yu continued to rule for decades until he dies, but the problem is Yu has a son. And although, according to Confucian legend, Yu tried to give the power to someone, to another sage, but most people chose to support Yu's own son. So Yu's own son created the first dynasty called Shang. And since then, the leader always gave the throne and power to his own son. So meritocracy is sort of abandoned. So since Yu's son Qi, we have three early dynasties: Xia dynasty, Shang dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty. You can just remember them as Xia, Shang, and Zhou. These are the rough dating of these three early dynasties. But the problem is, we don't have direct archaeological evidence to show the existence of the Xia dynasty. We do have some archaeological discoveries that can be dated to the legendary Xia period, that is 22,000 to 17,000 BCE, okay? But we don't have direct textual evidence to show that the remains or cultural settlements we found belong to the legendary Xia dynasty. So Xia dynasty remains a mystery. It's a mystery, yeah. Okay, but Shang dynasty is different, okay? Shang, we do have direct archaeological evidence to show Shang is real. The Shang dynasty is real. Okay, let me show you the evidence. Okay, By the way, this map shows the Neolithic settlements, cultural settlements in northern China. Yeah, this is a cultural settlement in today's Shanxi province in western China. You see this is probably from 6,000 years ago. You have this village surrounded by a ditch, probably served as a sort of a defense system to protect the population. And then in the village, you have all these primitive houses. There's one big house. We don't know what that is for. It's probably for the shaman or the elder to live, or it could be a common place. And then there is a yard or square in the middle of the village, probably served as some kind of venue for ceremonies, festivals, and important events. And then you have all these houses whose doors are facing the common yard. Yeah. This is from 6,000 years ago in Banpo, in the Banpo village in Shanxi, China. And then we also found lots of other artifacts, like these bone flutes dated to 6,000 to 9,000 years ago. Yeah, they can still you can still play them to make beautiful music. Yeah. Early Neolithic settlements are found everywhere in China. Okay, yeah, you have a Yangshao culture here. You have Da Wenkou culture here. You have a Hemudu culture here from 6,000 years ago. By the way, Hemudu culture is the earliest culture we found. We found humans domesticated rice. So rice probably was domesticated in the lower Yangtze Delta area near today's Shanghai. In Zhejiang province, there's a place called Hemudu. That's the place when we found the earliest rice domesticated by humans. And then later, the technology of growing rice gradually transmitted to southern China and Southeast Asia. And today, rice became the major crop in Southeast Asia and southern China. Okay, so Hemudu is where rice was first domesticated. And then we also found all kinds of pottery, right? And through the patterns, decorations of the pottery, archaeologists have identified several earlier cultures. Late Neolithic settlements, we have we have evidence showing the cultural communications between all these cultural settlements. So they're trading. They're probably also intermarrying. But through all kinds of cultural exchanges, you see the civilization gradually growing. Okay. Of course, tombs are the major discoveries. Archaeologists try to find out about these early cultures. Some tombs have very few funerary objects, but some tombs have a lot of pottery. So when you see this, you know that we have a social stratification. That means there's a gap between the poor and the rich. Okay, the gap between poor and rich already emerged in Neolithic period. And then you also find, in China, you also find a lot of jade objects. Chinese love jade. Well, part of the reason is because there isn't a lot of gold and silver mines in China. Okay, but in India and Mesopotamia, you see a lot of copper and gold mines. So gold is not a problem. So Indian, for example, Indian people really have a lot of gold objects, but artifacts. But in China, since gold mines are scarce, so instead the Chinese use gold. They have gold as their as decoration and as a major form of wealth. Yeah, even up to today. Yeah. So Chinese use jade to make all kinds of objects, right? This is called a cong. Yeah, we don't know what that is used for, but it's probably used for a lot of ceremonial or religious purposes, right? Bronze. Okay. So around like 4,000 years ago, China entered the Bronze Age. Okay, how Chinese learned about the technology of using bronze, we still don't know. This technology could have developed in China independently, or it could have been transmitted to China from Central Asia. Could be. I mean, there are multiple theories about this. So we still cannot answer this question definitively. but we do have lots of bronze objects discovered all over China, and between 4,000 to 3,000 years ago, 4,000 to 3,000 BCE, you see a lot of bronze objects, unearthed in many cultures in China. So let's move on to the Shang dynasty. Okay, the Shang. According to Confucian texts or records, the last king of the Xia dynasty. Okay, back to the timetable. The last king of the Xia dynasty was an evil king. Okay, so he committed a lot of crime and he offended a lot of people. So one of the tribes that the Xia ruled was called Shang, and they rose up and they overturned the Xia dynasty, and that's how the Shang people created a new dynasty in the Central Plain. And the Shang people invented writing. They invented writing. We know this with the certainty. The reason is because we have this oracle bones. Oracle bones. Oracle bones are turtle shells or ox bones used by the Shang priests and kings for oracle, for divinity. Okay, the Shang people, their religion is that they believe their ancestors, after their ancestors die, their spirits will linger in somewhere in the world for indefinite time. So as long as the descendants perform correct ritual, offer sacrifice to their ancestor spirits, their ancestor spirits will always be there, protecting them, blessing them. So there is a communication between the dead and the living. Okay, so that's the Shang belief. So when the Shang king is faced with a major question, like should I relocate my capital city? Should I engage in this war? My wife is pregnant. Am I going to have a son? When he has all these questions, he would ask their ancestors. And how do they ask? They write down the questions on the oracle bones, and then they roast the oracle bones so that it cracks. And then the priests would interpret the cracks to find out the answer. Okay, and then they would also carve down the answer. So on one oracle bone piece, normally you would find the answer and the question carved by the priests of the Shang. And we found tens of thousands of pieces of oracle bones from the Shang tombs and from the remains of the Shang capital. Okay, and all these oracle bone records provide us with a lot of information about the Shang king and their politics and their life. Okay, so yes, writing is invented in China for some kind of religious purpose, for the Shang kings to communicate with their ancestors. So that's how writing was invented. The Shang kings also made a lot of bronze vessels. Okay, the copper mines. Bronze is an alloy of tin and copper. Right? If you mix about 70% of copper and 30% tin, mix them up and heat it up until they become liquid, and then you mix them up, and then you wait for the alloy to cool down, and you have copper. Copper is much harder than just. I'm sorry. Bronze is. Then you have a bronze. Bronze is much harder than copper, so you can use bronze to make a weapon and the tools, much more useful than just a copper objects. Okay, so the Shang people monopolized the technology of bronze making. This allowed them to become militarily superior than to their neighbors. Okay, yeah, in Mesopotamia, since the copper mines are scarce, so people hammer the limited amount of bronze they got. So yeah, they hammered the bronze pieces and put them together to have objects. But in China, at least during the Shang dynasty, copper mines are ample. The Shang kings used a technology called casting to make all these beautiful objects. So these bronze vessels or objects, utensils, sometimes they're really, really large. They're big and it's super beautiful, okay? Super beautiful. I will show you several examples. These are the typical Shang bronze objects or utensils that they made. For example, this one, there's a tripod. No, this is not a tripod. This is a pot. Bronze pot is more than 1 ton, heavy, and it's very big. It probably can be used. Certainly, it was used as a pot for the Shang kings to cook. But sometimes these utensils are used as punishment tools, and the Shang kings, according to record, they boil human sacrifice. That means slaves or prisoner of wars in this kind of a pot till they die, and then they eat it up. Yes, the Shang kings eat human flesh a lot. Yeah. But Confucian texts rarely talk about this cannibalism conducted by the Shang kings. How do we know that? How do we know that the Shang kings are really, really violent and practiced cannibalism? Through archaeology. In Henan province, in Zhongyuan, this is the place. This is the center of the Shang culture. Archaeologists since the 1920s have discovered a lot of tombs, a lot of remains of cities and palaces, and archaeologists discovered a lot of human remains that are human sacrifice. And a lot of times, the Shang kings would hunt human sacrifice through in the neighboring tribes, and they catch thousands of prisoners of war, and then bring them to their capital, cut off their heads, and then put their body underneath the foundation of the palace they're building. This is a very common cultural practice that the Shang kings would do. Without archaeological discoveries, we probably would not know that the Shang kings are this violent, because according to Confucian texts, all these practices were very rarely mentioned. So only in 20th century we learn about this practice of Shang. So the Shang kings also, it's not uncommon for the Shang kings to kill more than 1,000 prisoners of war in one ceremony to sacrifice their ancestors. They need a lot of blood. They want a lot of blood shedding. Anyone watch the movie directed by Mel Gibson called Apocalypto? It's about the ancient Mayan culture. Actually, the kind of sacrifice scene when the ancient Maya priests kill prisoners of war to sacrifice their gods. This really reminds me of the Shang kings. Yeah, they're just like that. Yeah, it's a great movie, Apocalyptical, directed by Mel Gibson. It's about the Mayan culture. Actually, there is one theory about the similarity between Chinese Shang culture and ancient American culture. If you look at the map, all these cultures are located around the Pacific Rim. So the theory is that there is a lot of cultural similarities that can be identified about the cultures surrounding the Pacific. Yeah, actually, many research papers have been written about the similarities between Shang and the Mayan culture and other Central American cultures. Yeah, somehow they just share a lot of similarities, including the thirsty for blood in this case. Okay, so yeah, so that's the Shang culture. What else I want to talk about the Shang? Yeah, so the Shang kings are really bloodthirsty. Yeah, they want to kill a lot of people, a lot of human sacrifice to satisfy their ancestors' spirits and their deities. Yeah, until in the 11th or 12th century BCE, the Shang people were conquered by another people called Zhou, rising from the west. we still don't know where the Zhou people are from. They're from the West. Are they from Central Asia? We don't know. But what we do know is that the Zhou people had a different language, religion, and culture from the Shang people. So you cannot use the later term like Chinese to identify these people. They have no idea about what Chinese are, right? Yeah, they just know themselves as Zhou or Shang people, okay? They're organized by their tribal organization based on extended families, yeah. For example, the Zhou people is patriarchal. They share this lineage. A lineage is an anthropological term to refer to extended families that whose members believe that they share a common ancestor, male ancestor. So they share the same surname that's handed down from remote antiquity. And ancient wars are always in China organized based on families. So if you want to engage in a war, for example, when the Zhou people try to conquer the Shang, they would first mobilize their own families. So all the family members would get together, they put together all the weapons they have, and they try to come up with the horse chariots they have, right? Horse chariots, I want to talk about it a little bit. Horse chariots emerged in human history about 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. And then 4,000 years ago, during the Shang dynasty, horse chariots are widely used already, okay? This is an ancient Chinese horse chariot. See this image? This is discovered in an ancient tomb, yeah. So unfortunately, these are poor horses were buried in the tomb together with their owner. But we do have this horse chariot. And on the left, these are the ancient archaic Chinese characters for horse chariot. Yeah, actually today's Chinese character vehicle, 车, is based on the ancient character of horse chariot. So you do see this cultural continuity in terms of Chinese language that can be traced back to the Shang dynasty. Actually, a lot of characters used in oracle bones, carved on oracle bones, can be identified by modern Chinese without a special training. Without a special training, you can recognize them. It's the same. It's basically the same character. You can guess out of what it means. Let me give you some examples. For example, on the left is the ancient oracle bone character for wood. And on the right is the modern Chinese character for wood or tree. Here on the left is the oracle bone character for sun, and this is modern Chinese for sun. And Japanese also use this character. Yeah, for example, Nihon is how Japanese call themselves, and the Nihon starts with this character. And we see this character in oracle bone records. So this shows a very strong continuity of Chinese language all the way down to today. And the Shang kings built up huge tombs for themselves, buried with bronze utensils, human sacrifice bodies, and horse chariots. By the way, horse chariots probably was transmitted to China from Central Asia, from Central Asia, because between like 5,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago, we see horse chariots all of a sudden appear in multiple civilizations, in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, and in China. So very likely, horse chariots was invented in Central Asia. Yeah. Actually, the earliest horse chariots was, okay, if we look at this map, everybody can see this map? It's Eurasia. Hello? Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, very good. Good.
Yep.
Okay, so one thing not showing on this map is that from Mongolia here, or Manchuria is here, and Mongolia here, and then through Central Asia, Afghanistan here, and then through northern Iran and the mountain of Caucasus, and all the way to today's Ukraine, you have a huge grassland extending from Manchuria through Mongolia, Afghanistan, all the way to Ukraine. Okay, it's basically grassland. Yeah, some people call it a steppe, Gobi steppe or Gobi desert. Yeah, whatever. No matter what his name, what his name is, you have this flat land extending from Manchuria all the way to East Europe. This allowed a lot of nomadic peoples to travel freely from the east to west or from west to east. This is a huge advantage that Eurasia had. This allowed the transmission of the culture, technology, music, and commodities very easily in Eurasia. Okay, so horse chariots, earliest horse chariots, was discovered in today's Kazakhstan here. Yeah, Kazakhstan used to be part of the Soviet Union before 1991, but now it's an independent country. So this shows that horse chariots were probably invented by some nomadic people active in this big grassland in Eurasia. So it's not a coincidence that all these ancient civilizations almost at the same time started to use horse chariots. And horse chariots are like, in terms of military technology, they're like the tanks in modern warfare. If you have horse chariots and your enemies don't, you're invincible. You're invincible. And especially when you also have bronze weapon and your enemies don't, then you can just slash them like, I don't know, like a hot knife cutting butter, right? So this is the military advantage that the Shang people had. They had a bronze weapon. They also had horse chariots. So this allowed the Shang to conquer many of their tribes, the neighboring tribes, with ease. And this also allowed them to get thousands of human sacrifice at one battle, and they would kill them. If you look at the bronze, the oracle bone records, there are all kinds of horrifying records about how you treat a human body. Yeah, you can dry them out. You can turn them into, I don't know, some kind of a dry meat. Yeah, there are multiple ways to teach you how to cut human bodies in different ways. There are all kinds of various oracle bone characters that shows the way to treat human bodies. Quite horrible, actually, if you look at those records. But that's the daily life of Shang kings until the Zhou conquered them. So last thing I want to talk about today is the conquest of Shang by the Zhou people. Okay, so around the 12th century, 11th century BCE, the Zhou people rising from the west, and they conquered the Shang. So when the Zhou conquered Confucian records show that the Zhou people used to be affiliated with the Shang. They're protected by Shang or enslaved by Shang to a certain degree. And the Zhou people's ancestors, their job is to catch slaves and then give them to the Shang people, so that the Shang people can kill the slaves as human sacrifice. Until one generation of Shang king, he realized that, no, we should stop doing this. And we should attack Shang to forever stop this kind of horrible practice, cultural practice. And in the battle, in a major battle between Shang and Zhou, somehow the Shang was defeated. A legend has it that the Shang mobilized a lot of slaves to defend their capital, but the slaves, when they were pushed to the battlefield, they betrayed the Shang king. They turned around and helped the Zhou people to attack the Shang, and that's how the Shang was defeated. And the last Shang king, he was, according to record, he's a very corrupt, cruel, and horrible man. Okay, he would use all kinds of ways to kill people. For example, he would roast the people on a bronze vessel until, he would roast a live person until he's totally cooked. Or he would put somebody into a big pot with the boiling water until he's totally boiled to death. And the last Shang king would also, in order to gamble with his friends, he would have opened up the belly of a pregnant woman just to see the gender of the baby she carries. That all these cruel activities he did. But Shang was destroyed by Zhou. And when the Zhou king conquered the Shang, they forever forbidden the practice of human sacrifice. So this is how the Chinese civilization became different from Mayan, all right? From Mayan civilization or Aztec or Inca. civilization. But this happened, 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago, the Victoria Zhou king, they established a new culture. This culture is based on this question: why we Zhou people won the war, right? The Zhou, the Shang people, they had a superior military technology. They had a horse chariots. They had a bronze weapon. And they believed that if they sacrificed their ancestors well, they would always be blessed and protected by their ancestors. But they failed. So the Zhou king are asking themselves this question: why the Shang people still failed when they served their ancestor spirits that diligently? Something is wrong. So eventually the Zhou king and their followers came up with an answer. They say, whether you can hold on to the political power and be blessed by gods is not dependent upon how much you sacrifice and serve the ancestor spirits, okay? So political power is not contingent upon killing people, but instead, it's contingent upon your moral virtues. So the Zhou people, they invented a new concept called the mandate of the heaven, 天命, or the heavenly mandate. They believe that heavens are impartial. They only give blessing to morally virtuous rulers. So how do you prove yourself virtuous? You must not killing people, innocent people. You cannot kill innocent people. You must have some kind of moral principle. For example, you must take care of your own people, like the Zhou kings did. The Zhou kings believe that they take care of their people much better than the Shang. They're less cruel. They're more sincere. They're more loyal. The Zhou kings are more sincere, more loyal. They're more benevolent, passionate, right? They take care of their people better. They respect their fathers, father, mother. They take care of their people. So in other words, they're more exemplary in terms of family values. That's how you prove that you have the moral virtues in the Zhou vocabulary, which is called de virtues, moral virtues. So only those rulers with the moral virtues will be blessed by heaven, and only they are entitled for the title of kings. So heavenly mandate cannot be possessed based on how much you bribe your gods. It depends on how morally virtuous you are. Yeah, if you're righteous, benevolent, compassionate, and pious, and have a filial piety, then you'll be chosen by the heaven to become the ruler. So in other words, your access to throne or the title of king is not based on violence or bribery or any of these things, but instead it depends on how well you can take care of people. And that said, heavenly mandate can transmit from one family to another. If one family lose the kind of moral virtue, then heaven will choose some other family to fill the position of king. This is how Zhou conquered the Shang. So the Zhou people really invented a new set of political values to justify their conquest of the Shang. And this is the background of all these ancient Chinese philosophers we're going to talk about over this semester. Okay. All right. Any questions?
I had a quick question. So when you talk about like the heavenly mandate and being like, what is their like definition of heavenly mandate? Like, what's their definition of heaven? Is it? I'm assuming it's like different from the Christianity version of it. So how did they view that?
Okay, heavenly mandate is an abstract political concept, right? This is a sort of like a democracy, right? When we talk about democracy, 1,000 people have 1,000 definitions, right? But there are some values attached to this concept, like democracy. For example, people's consent. You need the people's consent to rule, right? The same thing for heavenly mandate. This is a concept put forward by Zhou people that conquered the Shang. They believe that it involves a whole series of moral virtues like sincerity, loyalty, filial piety, that means respect for parents, and also a really good intention towards your own people. Okay, I mean, these are abstract concepts, but they sort of mean something to people who believed in this concept. Okay, I mean, it doesn't mean that this concept cannot be manipulated. I mean, just like democracy, this concept, the concept of democracy can be manipulated too, right? I mean, people can have more than 1,000 definitions of democracy, but in general, all these conflicting definitions, somehow they have one overlapping part. That is, for example, you need an election, right? You need some kind of a checks and balance related to democracy. You need the people's consent for any government to rule, right? This is how you justify your government. So the Zhou people chose heavenly mandate to justify the legitimacy of their government. And they're trying to say, we're better than the Shang people because we're more virtuous. We're nicer people. We don't kill people. We don't kill innocent people like as a human sacrifice, right? Instead, we take care of people. We harmonize our family. We try to be diligent to serve the people, right? So there is a secular tendency in this new political concept that is heavenly mandate. But of course, again, this concept is subject to multiple interpretations. Different later dynasties, when they replace Zhou, they use, I mean, all later Chinese dynasties used this concept of heavenly mandate to justify their legitimacy to rule, even though some of the dynasties conquered the previous dynasty by sheer political power or military power. But they still use that term to justify their own rule. But as I said, these political concepts are not a Play-Doh that you can shape into any shape. Once you try to use that political concept, you somehow are also bound by the inner logic of those concepts. Just like when you use the concept of democracy, somehow you're bound by the inner logic associated with democracy, like people's consent, election, checks and balances, right? Same thing for heavenly mandate. Even though you conquered China by sheer military power, for example, in 13th century, the Mongols rising in Mongolia, they conquered China by sheer political power and by sheer military power, because the Mongols' fighting power is much more superior than the Chinese. So the Mongols conquered China, and the Mongols established a new dynasty in China called the Yuan dynasty. But then the Mongols also picked up this ancient concept of a heavenly mandate to justify their rule. They say, why we Mongols conquered China? Because we got the heavenly mandate. We're blessed by heaven because we are more virtuous leaders, although the Mongols almost never read a Confucian text. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Any other questions? Okay, very good. We're gonna wrap up here. So this is a little background about the early Chinese civilization. We talk about the early sage kings, the Confucian legends, and the Shang dynasty, and how the Zhou conquered the Shang. Okay, Confucius and many other early Chinese philosophers all came into being under the Zhou dynasty, under the Zhou period. The Zhou king actually ruled China for about 800 years. So they're pretty successful based on the concept of heavenly mandate probably contributed to the success. But towards the second half of the Zhou period, the Zhou king lost the power. We're going to talk about this later, next week. So eventually the Zhou lost the power and they practiced a so-called Fengjian system, similar to the European feudal system, in which political power is segmented. Many feudal lords, powerful feudal lords, dukes, and the local leaders, they defied Zhou King's power and they created their own kingdom or states, and they fight against each other. So that's the background in which early Chinese philosophies came into being. So we're going to talk about this next time. So yeah, that's all for today. And yeah, thank you. All right, so